Lent just started, and you've already broken your fasting, lost your patience, or skipped your prayers. You feel completely defeated, but listen to me carefully. Your failure isn't just weakness. It is a carefully orchestrated trap. The devil loves it when you treat Lent like a 40-day self-improvement project based on your own willpower. When your willpower cracks, he attacks you with discouragement, so you abandon the cross entirely. But Padre Pio warned us about this specific demonic tactic and gave us an emergency spiritual protocol. An urgent prayer you must say every single day until Easter to break this oppression. And it starts right now. Not tomorrow, not after you've cleaned yourself up. Right now, in the exact moment of your failure. Because here's what no one tells you about Lent. The fall was expected. The saints saw it coming. And God, in his terrifying wisdom, may have allowed it on purpose. But before we go any further, if you already feel the weight of those broken promises pressing on your chest, if you recognize that voice in your head saying, "You're worthless, you already ruined it, just give up," then I need you to do something right now. Type in the comments, "Lord, shatter my pride." Not because it's a social media ritual, not for the algorithm. You type it because that sentence is the first blow you land against the demon of discouragement today. You type it because the moment you confess your pride out loud, even in a comment box, heaven moves. The enemy hates that. He cannot stand it when a broken soul refuses to stay on the ground. Type it right now. Lord, shatter my pride. Then keep watching, because what I'm about to show you changes everything. Now, here's the first truth you need to understand. Willpower is not a spiritual weapon. Read that again. Willpower is not a spiritual weapon. It is a human tool, useful for diets, gym routines, and productivity schedules. But the spiritual life isn't a productivity schedule. It is a battlefield. And you don't bring a planner to a war. You bring a weapon. Now, let's talk about the trap. Because most Catholics walking into Lent this year walked straight into it without even realizing it. They sat down on Ash Wednesday with a plan. A clean, organized, ambitious plan. And somewhere between day 2 and day 5, something cracked. Maybe it was hunger. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was just one moment of weakness that felt, in that second, completely unstoppable. And then the voice came. You failed. Again, just like every year. That voice, that cold, familiar, crushing voice, is not your conscience. It is not God. It is not even your own honest self-assessment. It is a weapon, and it was aimed at you before Ash Wednesday even arrived. Think about how you approached Lent this year. Be honest. You probably made a list. Maybe you wrote it down. Maybe you just mapped it out in your head on the drive home from Mass. No sugar, no social media, daily rosary, morning offering, perhaps Stations of the Cross on Fridays, a real plan, a serious plan. And it felt good. That clarity, that structure, that sense of finally doing it right this time. That feeling, that satisfaction you had on Ash Wednesday night, lying in bed reviewing your Lenten program? That was the first warning sign, and you didn't see it, because what you were feeling wasn't zeal, not exactly. Underneath the genuine desire to grow closer to God, something else was mixed in, something far less holy. The quiet satisfaction of a man who believes he has finally built a system strong enough to fix himself. That is pride dressed in a prayer schedule. And the enemy saw it the moment it formed in your heart. Here's how the trap actually works. The modern Western mind, the same mind shaped by productivity apps, fitness streaks, and self-help bestsellers, has infiltrated the way American Catholics approach their spiritual lives. We have turned Lent into a self-improvement sprint. 40 days of spiritual discipline that we track, measure, and evaluate the same way we track calories or steps. When you treat Lent like a streak on an app, you are playing by the enemy's rules. Because the moment the streak breaks, and it will break, the entire architecture collapses. Day 3. You snap at your wife over something small. Or you reach for the phone out of habit and spend 20 minutes scrolling, or the fasting headache wins and you eat before the fast is over. One crack, and immediately, the voice is there. You ruined it. The whole thing is ruined now. What's the point of keeping a perfect fast for the next 35 days if day 3 is already broken? You might as well start fresh next year. Maybe you're just not the kind of person who can do this. Notice what that voice did. In 3 sentences, it took a single, ordinary human failure and turned it into a verdict on your entire identity. That is not sorrow. That is not conviction. That is not the voice of the Holy Spirit pressing on your conscience to return to God. That is a psychological ambush. And the terrifying part is this. The enemy doesn't care about the chocolate you ate. He doesn't care about the 20 minutes of scrolling. He doesn't care about the lost temper in the kitchen. Those things on their own are small. They're the kind of failures that a humble soul confesses quickly, stands up from, and forgets by morning. What the enemy cares about is the next 35 days. If he can use that one small failure to make you feel so guilty, so defeated, so exposed in your own weakness that you stop praying, he wins everything. He wins 35 days of silence between you and God. He wins 35 days of you walking into Holy Week already spiritually exhausted and ashamed. That is the plan. That has always been the plan. The demon of discouragement is patient. He is precise. He doesn't need you to commit a mortal sin on Ash Wednesday. He just needs you to feel bad enough about a small failure that you quietly, privately, without even telling anyone, stop fighting. And you won't even call it giving up. You'll call it being realistic. You'll call it starting over after Easter. You'll tell yourself you need a clean slate. But a clean slate that starts in 35 days is a lie, because the soul doesn't get clean by waiting. It gets clean by returning, crawling if necessary, right now. St. Francis de Sales, who understood the human heart with devastating precision, wrote that there is a difference between holy sorrow and unholy sorrow. Holy sorrow says, I have offended God. I will go to confession and start again today. It is sharp, yes, but it moves. It has momentum. It carries you toward the altar. Unholy sorrow says, I have failed again. I am beyond repair. I will sit in this guilt and let it paralyze me. Holy sorrow is a door. Unholy sorrow is a cage. And the enemy is very, very good at making the cage feel like humility. When you're sitting in that guilt, when you're replaying the failure and punishing yourself for it, when you're convinced that the depth of your shame somehow proves how seriously you take God, you feel almost holy in your suffering. You don't. You are trapped. And the difference between those two things is everything. The saints understood this. They understood it because they fell harder than you have. They fell publicly in ways that cost them everything. And they got up, not because they had recovered their dignity, but because they had stopped caring about their dignity entirely. That shift, that terrifying, liberating shift, is what this Lent is actually asking you for. Not a perfect streak. Not a spotless record. Your ego surrendered completely at the foot of a cross that was never yours to carry alone. And before I show you exactly how that surrender works, before I give you the truth that changes the entire logic of your failure, I want to make sure you have the weapon in your hands when you hear it. There's a guide I keep coming back to called The Power of the Rosary with Padre Pio, Miracles, Protection, and Divine Graces. It is not devotional decoration. It is a tactical manual. Padre Pio's direct teachings on how the Rosary functions as spiritual armor, testimonies of real lives turned around by this prayer, a 30-day guide, and specific prayers for protection and healing. A small investment in your soul. The link is pinned in the comments right now. Get it before we go further, because what I'm about to tell you will hit completely differently when you understand that you already have the weapon that answers it. Now, The truth. God didn't look at your broken fast and turn away. He didn't cross his arms and wait for you to get your act together before he'd speak to you again. No, he looked at your broken fast and saw exactly what he was looking for. Your need, raw, undeniable, humiliating need. And that is the sacrifice Lent was always asking for. Here's the theological truth that most Lenten devotionals are too polite to say out loud. The early failure isn't an accident. For many souls, maybe for your soul this year, God allows the crack in the first week on purpose. Not to punish you, not to expose you as a fraud, but to destroy at the root the one thing that was going to poison your entire Lent if it survived. Your confidence in yourself. The saints called it spiritual self-reliance. The belief buried so deep you don't even know it's there, that with enough discipline and enough effort, you can earn your way through Lent on your own strength. That you can present God with 40 days of spotless behavior, as if you were filing a perfect tax return. That belief is not faith. It is a very elegant, very religious form of pride. And God, because he loves you, will not let it stand. So he lets the wall crack. Early, loudly, undeniably, not so you despair, so you finally, for the first time maybe, actually reach for him instead of for your own willpower. This is the paradox at the center of the spiritual life. And the saints lived it with their whole bodies. The path to God doesn't run through your strength, it runs directly through your weakness, through the moment when you have nothing left to offer but the wreckage of your own failed plan. St. Paul understood this so completely that he wrote it like a battle cry, "When I am weak, then I am strong." Not despite the weakness, through it. Because weakness, fully accepted and offered to God, becomes something the enemy cannot touch. The enemy can exploit your pride. He can use your perfectionism against you like a blade, but he has no weapon against a man on his knees who has stopped pretending. None. Zero. And this brings us to the man who knew the enemy better than almost anyone who has ever lived. Francesco Forgione was born in 1887 in a small village in southern Italy. He was a thin, quiet boy who felt the weight of heaven very early in his life. He entered the Franciscan Capuchin order, took the name Pio, and was ordained a priest in 1910. By 1918, he bore on his hands, his feet, and his side the wounds of the crucified Christ, the stigmata, wounds that bled for 50 years, and that no physician could explain or close. But the wounds on his hands were not the hardest thing he carried. During Lent, Padre Pio's spiritual warfare intensified to a point that most of us cannot fully imagine. His fellow friars would hear him at night, crashes, voices, the sounds of physical struggle inside his locked cell. He woke some mornings with bruises on his face and body. The attacks were not subtle, they were vicious, calculated and relentless. Picture this. It is before dawn in San Giovanni Rotondo. The friary is silent. Padre Pio pulls himself up from the floor of his cell, his face marked, one eye swollen, his brown habit torn at the shoulder from a struggle no one witnessed, but everyone heard. His hands are bleeding again. He moves to the small basin in the corner, splashes cold water on his face, presses a cloth against his palms. Then he straightens, picks up his breviary from the floor where it had fallen, and walks, slowly, deliberately, down the corridor toward the church. He didn't pray for the attacks to stop. He said Mass. That is not stoicism. That is not toughness. That is a man who has understood at the deepest possible level that the battle is real, the enemy is real, and the only answer to the attack is to walk straight into the very thing the enemy is trying to keep you from. For you, the attack doesn't come with physical bruises. It comes with something far more effective against the modern American Catholic. It comes as a feeling, that low, heavy, suffocating feeling that you've already lost this Lent, that you're too far behind to catch up, that God is tired of your cycle of good intentions and broken promises, that this year will end like every other year, a private embarrassment buried under the noise of Easter Sunday. That feeling is not honest self-knowledge. That feeling is a spiritual attack, aimed at one specific target, your return to prayer. Because if the enemy can keep you away from prayer just for a few days, just long enough for the distance to feel normal, Lent is effectively over. Padre Pio understood this with absolute clarity. He told his spiritual children, souls who are called to the spiritual life are under greater attack. Greater attack, not the same as everyone else. More. If this Lent has felt unusually brutal, if the temptations have been sharper, the discouragement heavier, the silence from God more deafening than you expected, understand what that might actually mean. It might not mean you are failing. It might mean the enemy considers you worth the extra effort. That is a terrifying thought. It is also a profoundly encouraging one. Because the enemy does not deploy his best weapons against souls he has already won. He deploys them against souls who are still fighting. A woman came to Padre Pio once trembling, convinced she was beyond saving. She had fallen into the same sin so many times that she had begun to believe the confessional was closed to her. She stood in front of him, hands shaking, and told him she was too ashamed to even ask for absolution again. Padre Pio looked at her without flinching. His voice was quiet, certain. He told her that every time she fell and came back to God, she gave him more glory than a soul that had never fallen at all. Because the return, the decision to crawl back to the altar when everything in you says you don't deserve to be there, that return is an act of faith so pure, so stripped of self, that it silences the enemy completely. Then he sat back and said something she never forgot for the rest of her life. The devil is terrified of the humble soul that keeps returning. He can handle the proud sinner. He cannot handle the broken one who refuses to stay down. Sadness and anxiety, Padre Pio said, are tools of the devil, not feelings. Tools, weapons, deployed with intent. Your job, your only job after you fall, is to get up, right now, immediately, like a soldier who gets hit, checks the wound, and moves forward anyway because the mission isn't over. Because your mission isn't over. Not until Easter Sunday. Here it is. Not a long novena, not a complicated liturgical formula that requires a book and a ribbon bookmark. A short, direct daily prayer said every morning from now until Easter Sunday, that reorients your entire spiritual posture and dismantles the enemy's strategy at its foundation. Say this out loud, right now if you can, and then say it again tomorrow morning before your feet hit the floor. Lord, my willpower is nothing. I offer you my failure and my broken pride. Today I start again. Padre Pio, lend me your spiritual shield for today's battle. That's it. Those 4 sentences. Now let me show you why they are devastating to the enemy, because this isn't poetry. Every line is a precision strike. Lord, my willpower is nothing. This sentence alone destroys the foundation of the trap. The entire Lenten trap is built on the premise that you were relying on your own strength. The moment you speak this out loud and mean it, truly mean it, not as a pious formula, but as a confession of actual fact, the trap collapses. Because the trap has no power over a man who isn't claiming any power of his own. The enemy built his strategy around your pride. You just told him you don't have any. I offer you my failure and my broken pride. This is the line most people resist, because it feels wrong to offer God something ugly. We want to come to him with something clean, something worthy, something that at least resembles a successful attempt. But this is exactly what the cross was. God didn't wait for humanity to clean itself up before he sent his Son. He sent him into the wreckage, and he accepted from his Son not a perfect life that ended comfortably, but a body broken, a death that looked like total failure, an offering that the world mocked as worthless. Your failure, offered consciously and deliberately to God, participates in that same logic. You are not handing God garbage. You are handing God the one thing your pride would never willingly surrender, and that surrender, that act of spiritual exposure, is an offering of incalculable value. Today I start again. 3 words that shatter the enemy's timeline. The demon of discouragement operates on a long view. He wants you to think in terms of the whole 40 days, the streak broken, the record stained, the Lent already ruined. He wants the weight of every past failure sitting on top of every future moment. This sentence refuses that weight. Today, not the whole Lent, not a new promise that stretches to Easter. Today, this morning, this hour, this single contained manageable beginning. The soul that prays this isn't claiming it will never fall again. It's claiming something far more powerful. That right now, in this moment, it is standing up. One more time. Padre Pio, lend me your spiritual shield for today's battle. You are not asking Padre Pio to fight your battles for you. You are asking him to intercede, to stand with you in the way that the saints stand with the Church, present and active before the throne of God, aware of your specific war and specific wound. Padre Pio knew what it was to need a shield. He wore the wounds of Christ for 50 years. He knew what the enemy's attacks felt like when they landed. And he is not a distant historical figure who stopped caring when he died. The saints are more alive than you are right now, and they listen. Ask him every morning, mean it. Now, the posture matters as much as the words. Don't pray this like a defeated victim reciting a mantra. Pray it like a wounded soldier who just had his worst bleeding stopped and is now picking up his weapon again. There is a difference between those 2 men. One is waiting for the war to end, the other is walking back into it. You are walking back into it. Your knees might still be shaking. Your confidence might be in pieces on the floor. That's fine. Walk anyway. God does not ask you to arrive at the front line uninjured. He asks you to arrive. And one more thing. This prayer works best when it's followed immediately by action. Not a long, elaborate action. A small one. Make the sign of the cross. Open your Bible. Light a candle if you have one. Pick up your rosary, even if you only manage 1 decade. The action tells your soul that the prayer was real. It breaks the paralysis. It sends a signal to yourself, to heaven, and to the enemy that you have chosen to move. The enemy's greatest victory in your life is not the sins you commit. It is the prayers you never said because you felt too broken to start. Say the prayer. Start anyway, every morning from now to Easter. No matter how many times you fall between now and then, you start again and again and again, until the tomb is empty and the war for this season is won. Now I want you to stop thinking about yourself for a moment. Think about your home. Think about the people inside it. Your spouse, your children, your parents if they live with you. The ones who depend on you not just for food and shelter and a paycheck, but for something they may not even have words for yet. Spiritual covering. The sense that someone in this house is standing watch. If your own personal discipline fell apart in just a few days, how vulnerable is your family right now? Let that question sit. Because here's what Lent reveals about the home. The enemy doesn't just attack individuals, he attacks households. He is patient and he is strategic, and he understands that if he can erode the spiritual life of the head of the family or the heart of the mother, he doesn't need to attack the children directly. The door is already open. You put bars on your windows, you lock your car, you have passwords on your accounts. You do all of this to protect what matters. But the spiritual front door, the most important threshold in your home, is left wide open when the family depends entirely on human effort and human willpower to keep the enemy out. Lent is the time to build a wall of fire around your house. Not a wall built from discipline alone. Not a wall built from good intentions and ambitious plans. A wall built from the weapons of heaven. Prayer, sacraments, and consecrated intercession. The rosary is not a decoration. It is not a cultural Catholic habit. It is a weapon of war that Our Lady herself described at Fatima as the prayer that can change the course of history. If it can do that, if a group of peasant children praying in a field in Portugal could, through the rosary, alter the trajectory of an entire century, then it can protect your house. It can protect your marriage. It can protect your children from what is coming at them right now, through screens, through culture, through the slow, patient erosion of everything sacred. That's exactly what the power of the Rosary with Padre Pio, miracles, protection, and divine graces gives you. Real testimonies of lives changed. Padre Pio's own teachings on the Rosary as spiritual armor. A 30-day guide that builds the habit into your daily life without overwhelming you. And specific prayers for protection and healing that you can pray over your home, your marriage, your children. Tonight. This is the wall. Click the link pinned in the comments. Get it for yourself. Get it for your family. Consider it the most important investment you make this Lent, not in your own comfort, but in the spiritual safety of everyone under your roof. And now, before you close this video, I need one more minute with you. Just you. Picture the altar on Easter Sunday morning. The church is full, the candles are lit, the bells are ringing, the priest is saying the words, "He is not here, he is risen," and you are standing there. Not because your Lent was perfect, but because you refuse to stay down. Because every morning, no matter how many times you fell the day before, you said the prayer, picked up your weapon, and moved. That person standing at the altar on Easter morning, that is who you are fighting to become right now. Close your eyes, take a breath, and pray this with me out loud right now. A covenant with God, not a promise of perfection, a promise of return. Lord, I will not surrender. No matter how many times I fall between now and Easter Sunday, I will get up. I give you my weakness, my pride, and my broken plans. I am yours. Until the tomb is empty, I will keep fighting. That prayer just changed something. You may not feel it yet. The feelings will come later, or they won't, and it won't matter, because the covenant was made in truth, not in emotion. Heaven heard it. The saints heard it. Padre Pio heard it, and the enemy heard it too. He knows what it means when a broken soul stops trying to clean itself up first and simply decides, on its knees in its failure, to return to the Father anyway. It means the trap didn't work. It means Lent isn't over. It means you're still in the fight. Go to confession this week. Pray the emergency prayer every morning. Pick up your rosary. Build the wall. And don't you dare give up. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not on the hardest day between now and Easter. The cross was not abandoned on Friday, and neither are you.